In 2020, something didn't add up. When fear replaced common sense and critical thinking, and protocols stopped matching what we were seeing, a lot of us started asking questions. And once you start digging, once you start researching, you can't unsee it. Welcome to Nurses Out Loud. I'm Jodi O'Malley, ER nurse and nursing ethics educator. And this is where we talk truth, patient rights, and real-world healthcare so you can make informed decisions and advocate with confidence. If you've been looking for your people, here we are. If this resonates, if you find yourself nodding along, please like, follow, and share this show with at least one person who needs it. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate. Today's episode of Nurses Out Loud is sponsored by West Cocoa Pharmacy and Compounding in Cocoa, Florida. They partner with licensed providers to compound ivermectin and other repurposed drugs, plus integrative protocols for people working with their oncology team, along with low-dose naltrexone, methylene blue, bioidentical hormone replacement, and men's health formulas. And my favorite part is you can speak to Nurse Donna for free. Learn more at cocopharmacy.com, COCOA pharmacy.com. This is educational only, not medical advice. All right, friends, welcome back to Nurses Out Loud. I'm your host, Nurse Jodi O'Malley. Before I bring on my guest, I want to tell you why today's conversation matters to me personally. In 2021, I blew the whistle while working as a nurse inside the federal system after witnessing what I believe were serious threats to patient safety, along waste, fraud, and abuse. That experience changed my life, and it's one of the reasons why this show exists today. Because if nurses don't understand the ethical and legal terrain we're standing on, we get steamrolled by policy, pressure, protocols, and fear, especially during a crisis. It's also why I created a post-2020 nursing ethics course for nurses, real-world ethical breakdowns we all watched unfold. Informed consent, coercion, institutional pressure, retaliation against clinicians who spoke up, and how quickly policy can replace patient-centered care. So today, I'm bringing you an attorney who has been in the fight, inside the courtroom and in the trenches, during the COVID era and beyond. My guest, attorney Rachel Rodriguez, is based in West Palm Beach, Florida. Originally from Atlanta, educated at Wheaton College and Rutgers Law. And she's the founder of Verus Law Group. She's also served as special counsel with the Thomas More Society on matters of religious liberty. In 2021, she began challenging pandemic-era civil rights abuses, representing firefighters and first responders against Orange County's vaccine mandate, and suing on behalf of parents against a public school mask mandate. You know how I feel about masks, guys. Since then, she's taken on major employers, including Disney, the Washington Nationals, Amgen, and others, over similar legal overreach. And today, she's currently working with the national coalition focusing on exposing failures in hospitalized COVID patient care, seeking justice for families and accountability for those responsible. But before we hit record, Rachel told me something I didn't know, that she's running for governor of the state of Florida. So I want to ask a few questions about that because listeners, I'm sure, are excited to hear what your position is and what you changed and how that connects to the work that you've been doing. So Rachel, welcome to Nurses Out Loud. I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you so much, Jodi. It's really an honor to be here.
Let's start off with the big announcement. Running for governor for the state of Florida. I just did a show with Nurse Nicole. Actually, there were two. There was a House bill and a Senate bill that he was supposed to sign to eliminate vaccine mandates. And they woke up one day last week and found out that that part of the bill had been gutted out. So we're extremely disappointed because this is his last year as governor and he could have done something really big and he chose not to.
It's been really tough on that angle. I want to applaud, our governor. I want to applaud those who have been in positions of leadership, Dr. Ladapo, others who have made this state better, much better than other
Mhm.
states during the pandemic era. And I think credit where credit is due. In fact,
Yeah.
you mentioned the case that we had with the firefighters in Orange County. And I'm really grateful because while we filed that, and that was prior to the change in the law in 2021, in November of 2021, it was still unlawful, even prior to that, what was going on because these were public employees. And there was already a law in place that you did not have to show papers essentially of the
Mhm.
of your COVID shots in order to get onto public property. And so because public employers have to go onto public property, then a mandate there was unlawful according to the language of the statute. And the state of Florida agreed. Then Attorney General Ashley Moody entered an amicus brief in support of my clients in that case. And I'm really grateful for that. And so there was
Right.
really good interaction there, and we've had that throughout. However, as you note, there's more to be done. Tyranny doesn't sleep, and so I remember when I was up in D.C., there was a bill. I can't even remember which building it was, but etched into the stone of the building, and it stuck with me. I don't want to say who it was that said it because I probably get it wrong. My memory doesn't serve, but it was the eternal vigilance is the price of
Mm.
liberty, and that's what we have to have. So even when we have a good administration or far better than in other places. Still have to, we the people are the ones who give our consent to be governed. We are the ones who self govern. And we have to
Mhm.
have eternal vigilance if we're going to keep that freedom, because that freedom comes from God. It doesn't come from the state. Parental rights, the rights to steward, I'm going to say it this way, steward our bodies as what God has given us.
Mhm.
So, therefore, medical freedom in that. All of those things are rights given by God, and therefore they come with attendant responsibilities. And it's on us to make sure
Yeah.
that we have those rights in place and to hold our leadership accountable. And so that's what I want to promote in this campaign, number one. And then, of course, in governing in the years to follow upon a win. And so I want to follow up on what has been right in Florida, but there's still more reform that
Mhm.
needs to happen.
There is. When I was speaking with Nurse Nicole about it, we just feel that politics is always at play,
Yes.
and if who knows if he wants to run for president, if this was something that he had to like give up to do it. That's what we're speculating. That's
Mm,
our, opining on the subject, if you will. But it's just really hard when a politician comes out. I believe it was in October of last year. We're removing all mandates. Florida is going to be vaccine free. And then right at the last second, the medical freedom people that really pushed and
right.
advocated for this bill, they wake up to see that it's gone. But I hear where you're coming from. Give credit where credit is due. I've also heard that saying that if you agree with somebody 80% of the time, they're not your enemy. So Governor DeSantis is definitely not an enemy of Nurses Out
That's right.
Loud. We do, yeah, we do appreciate everything he did for the state of Florida and really showing the country at a
Yeah.
time where numbers and data were just being propagandized. And he really did take a bold move in what he had done with Florida.
But you're absolutely right. The fact of the matter is we can't hold the standard to, well, it's better than. Better than what? You know, I
Mhm.
believe the standard is for personal character is Jesus Christ, and for the way that we live out our lives and what we're doing and the value of our productivity, the standard is the kingdom of God. And that's love, joy,
Amen.
peace, life. It's not, well, I'm better and I'm taking all these pharmaceuticals. No, it's, I think we can see that. I think that we need to have more vision, not less. I think we need to settle less than we do. And if anything, the COVID
Mhm.
era woke me up to things that I didn't understand they were that bad. It's M. Stanton Evans' law of inadequate paranoia. Have you heard this?
No.
The law of inadequate paranoia, which is, of course, a joke. The law of inadequate paranoia is that no matter how bad a thing is, when you look closer, it's much worse. So that's what I saw in the COVID era. And I think we can't lose our joy and we can't lose our hope. But at the same time, we need to buckle down and work. And there's more in Florida. I mean, one of the components of my platform is that we need to restore medical freedom. As you just pointed out, it's still not restored. We still, Heather Hudson's son, Cody, is suffering. And I'm sure you've spoken with her many, many times. And there was a push for what was termed Cody's Law. And it's a very straightforward approach, very reasonable, right within where the law already stands on Social Security benefits and helping the disabled and being able to fast track benefits, so to speak, needs of those who are severely disabled. Why couldn't we even get that to move forward? What was the holdup on that? And obviously, there's a give and take in legislation, and I understand that. But why is there so much pushback on some of these things that are right within the norms of what our legislation already is? Why is there so much pushback on that? And I think at the very least, we need to ask that question of our current leaders, and certainly of all the people who are planning to lead, to serve the state of Florida in the position of governor, and all of those that are going to serve in the position of legislators as representatives of the people. We need to ask those hard questions, and I intend to do so during this campaign.
Yeah, well, God bless you. I really appreciate you bringing your faith into this because, I don't believe that they're separate. It's just with me being a nurse and I talk about my faith and people ask me, well, why don't you just stick to nursing? Well, first of all, my identity is in Jesus Christ.
That's
Nursing is a calling that I have on me to do, So I don't think, and there's also something in the code of ethics that says to honor your wholeness of character. So we have to be who we are authentically at all times. And like you said, be loving, be kind, be respectful, engage in discourse. These are all things that we should be doing. And I'm really happy to hear that that is something that you are upholding yourself to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I understand the political game. It's a game. There's elements to that game. I get it. But again, I go back to, I think we're aiming at standards that are too low. And I don't want to do that. And it's very, very difficult to look at the standard as Christ. But he's king of the universe. I believe it's Philippians 2. I hope I'm not wrong about that. Where it says, think in the mind of Christ, who being God still humbled himself, incarnate, came into the earth in order to serve the very creation that he made. There was no reason for that. He didn't have to do it. Some days when I look at us, I think, good gracious, why did you do it? But he did that and then humbled himself throughout his life, demonstrating to us a way of honoring others, a way of glorifying and honoring God, and then served the purpose that he came to do, which was to pay for us, to redeem us in the terms of the Mosaic Law. And I think we should do that. It's very, very hard in a corrupt world. I think the corruption everywhere, I see this as a lawyer, and this could go into why am I doing this now? As a lawyer, I look at our systems, our judicial system, our justice system, and I don't see justice, Jodi. It's not just the punishment is in the process. We've seen that with people who are fighting corruption in the very democratic system. I'm not saying democracy, but the democratic system of voting. I mean, everybody knows there's been fraud now. It's common knowledge. The evidence is out there. And yet people are being demonized for standing up against that. And this is the case everywhere. It's not just that, but that's one of the very obvious examples. We also saw it in the medical freedom movement of the last several years that those people risk their licenses, their professional licenses, to say something or even just ask a question. So that is unfortunately happening throughout. And this was and people, if they paid attention, could see that it was part of the court system too. And I'm not saying every single judge out there is engaged in malice or wickedness. That's not my point. I think a lot of it is apathy. frankly.
Hmm.
But if we're not seeking a righteous standard, if we're not seeking justice, if we're not seeking truth, then it's going to be as if it's the other. And so, what I see in the court system as a litigator is a lot of status quo. This is how things are done. Well, the case law allows this, so we're gonna frame it the way we want to in order to get through this way. And what happens is you denying people access to the court, which is a constitutional right. You're actually
Yeah.
denying people access to have their day in court, to have their claims heard. And after a certain point of doing that as a solo practitioner with the resources that a solo practitioner has, I don't think there's a lot more utility for me in the litigation realm. I mean, I took on very, very hard matters for public interest against the public narrative, I guess, or the power narrative.
Yeah.
And so when I was invited to consider politics, I mean, several of us as litigators were already talking about how politics, the elected office is the next step for us to fight this fight. If we don't want to just stop, because,
Hmm.
how many cases being kicked out of court, and now what's called the statute of limitations, the time that you have to bring your claims to court,
Right.
for most people have run. So what do we do now? We've got to address that area. We've got to have leadership that says, I understand intimately what happened, and I'm going to promote and pursue along with the legislature. So getting into the legislative and the executive branches and say, we've got to have the courage to do what's necessary to see that liberty is protected. Eternal vigilance is what we have to have.
Yes, I agree with you. I was actually one of those people that was speaking up at the nurses station. I mean, I was speaking out about how protocols were overriding patients. They didn't make any sense. I had kept blowing the whistle. I didn't know that that's what it was
Yeah.
called,
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
was doing. But I was blowing the whistle for a year when finally the Lord was like, record this conversation,
Oof.
with the pharmacist that decided to not fill a doctor's order for Safe Med ivermectin, and that the patient who was dying wanted to try it. And I have a $500,000 lawsuit. I'm supposed to be finally going to jury trial after 4 years.
Wow.
My case with HHS, I heard the judge, it was a 5-day hearing. I was on the stand for like 10 hours. That was in June of 24. That still hasn't been ruled on. So tell me, what were you hearing from families? Like, what type of cases did you take on? Because for me, overall, I felt like it was the protocols that killed people, not
Yeah.
COVID.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And first, I want to just tell you, I sincerely applaud you for going through this process and sticking it out to the end. There are people who actually get PTSD from litigation these days. And it goes to my point. I mean,
Mhm.
another pillar of my platform is we need to reform the courts. We need to understand what's happening there and
Yeah.
recognize that justice isn't being done. And and part of that is you need to see something moving forward if you know what the truth is, especially with the stakes being as high as they are. In what you were blowing the whistle on was murder. Murder, in my view,
Mhm.
in the hospitals. So of course
Yeah.
you don't want to wait 4
Yeah.
years, and meanwhile people have continued to die under the same protocols. So to your question, I did not take cases of medical malpractice simply because, and I started an entirely different pro bono project with Mimi Miller on this and more people in my team. Paul Gardner, Kelly Collins has come on with this, and more. I don't want to miss any names, but early on, I want to say it was 2021. I think it was 2021. I saw this happening and I thought, this looks like people are being killed. I wasn't, I'm not even a medical professional, but it seemed pretty clear to me. So I started speaking with Brad Geyer at Former Feds Group, and we were talking about what do we do. And I had just gone to speak with one of the top medical malpractice litigators in the state of Florida because I thought, I'm a civil litigator. I really don't know the area of medical malpractice, but if nobody else is doing this and people are being murdered, we need to stop this. And it turns out that
Mhm.
the what's called the tort law in Florida, so medical malpractice, wrongful death cases, the law it just wasn't favorable for bringing these cases forward, especially against the public narrative, especially under all the pressure that was happening. You would need massive amounts of money to do it. You need the expert witnesses. It was an insurmountable task, even if you had the will. And at the end of the day, damages are capped, and worse. And this goes to the first point we were talking about. Unfortunately, our legislature in Florida had, in some of the immediate COVID laws, decided to grant further immunity than the federal immunity under the PrEP Act. And so, unfortunately, in Florida, I mentioned it before, the statute of limitations, so the period of time that you could bring a claim was reduced from 2-year statute for medical malpractice and wrongful death to 1 if it related to COVID. That's it. You're done then. We can't move forward. And that was a really, really terrible thing to realize. But I said, you know what? All right, let's go criminal. If this is murder, if we can show the evidence that this is murder, we can get the intent and the other elements to show, we need to pursue this. And so that's what I started doing. And so I talked with Brad at Former Feds, and God really put it together. I'm going to be honest, because I was talking to people trying to figure out how do we move this forward. I'm not even a prosecutor. So, again, it was outside the realm of my ken as far as law. But little by little, the pieces came together. And then I started working with Mimi Miller, who was, prior to coming down to Florida, she had been a prosecutor right out of law school in Pennsylvania, a godly woman, and a brilliant lawyer, young lawyer. And so I had been trying to work out, let's look at these protocols and what they actually demonstrate. What's the evidence we actually have? And this is your area, of course, but from the legal side, we were looking at that. How does that relate to state criminal code? That's what we started with, because at that time, by 2021, we were in the land of the federal government is not going to be helping us very much.
Right.
And so we said, but you know what? Criminal law is a state law issue. So we can, and there's 50 jurisdictions. Let's start one by one. And so what ended up happening is Mimi put together, she carefully prayed over and then read the entire Florida code and adjusted all the evidence that we had and brought in a lot more evidence. And of course, that's been compiling, and set forth, here are the elements of the crimes of murder, homicide, manslaughter. We even have state RICO. State RICO. I call it the COVID criminal entities, because there was so much money exchanging hands for this through the PrEP Act. From the PrEP Act authorization of the countermeasures, paid out through the CARES Act, and the bonuses. And I mean, it's really disgusting stuff when you start looking at it. So you've got RICO, you've got assault and battery, because people were given treatments against their will. They were given remdesivir, they were put on ventilators, things that were without informed consent, obviously. You also have, in many, many states, this is true in Florida, you have crimes that are established based on abuse of the vulnerable populations. So either the elderly, the disabled, the involuntarily, I don't want to say committed, but involuntary, like caretaker statutes, right? So if you're under the care of somebody and that person abuses you, that's a crime. And so we also had, those are sort of your main categories right there. But also there are statutes in some of the states against terrorism. And this is a big deal, because what we saw is that the deaths in the hospital were being used, and I don't want to say for all the purposes, but at the very least, some of the policy purposes of showing that little death ticker all the time and scaring people, that was inducing terror and panic in the public in order to effectuate certain actions. So either policy considerations or trying to move the populace, the society, in a particular direction. That's the definition of terrorism. So I want to stop there. There's so much more to unpack, but to your point, that's why we started doing that. And we did that process in now 7 states. And we're still moving forward, and we're trying to adjust that. There's more. I'll leave it to you. I don't want to go too far into that, but it's a really big deal, and we want to see. Actually, I can talk about it. We did open a couple of investigations on that.
Okay, yeah, I want to hear about it. Let's say if any of them are moving forward in any way.
Well, we got 2 open investigations in 2 states on the basis of this evidence. One appears to still be going on. And as you know, they're confidential criminal investigations. So especially if there's a grand jury involved. And so I haven't been given all the information about one. The other has concluded. And it was a disappointing conclusion because what was interesting is the DA was very interested in this information and took it forward, asked us for very specific information. This was out of Texas. And we presented all of that. We have, the other thing I wanted to mention is we have individuals who either survived or their family members did not, the patients themselves suffering under these protocols, and they are the witnesses coming forward. So we don't represent them in the typical sense of representation in court, but we've been advocates on behalf of these witnesses coming forward to law enforcement, the DAs or the attorneys general, and saying these people have been harmed or killed, and it's your obligation, it's your responsibility to investigate this. So we had the individuals in that particular county went forward, and so it was. I'm very pleased with at least how the information was solicited from us. And they went all the way to a grand jury. And somewhat surprisingly, the grand jury did not pursue any charges. And I think that's very interesting because the way the process works is the grand jury is brought forward, just like a general jury, that the grand jury is pulled from the population. And it made me wonder, and maybe you would know this more than I, or in your conversations, that it made me wonder if the idea, the truth, but the idea, the concept that those that we are supposed to trust, public health officials, the government, and hospital administration, as well as the care providers, were murdering for hire. And I wonder if that's just a cliff that's a little too steep for most of the public to accept. It's still true. That's what the evidence presents. I mean, that the Republican Party in Oklahoma has adopted wholesale the brief that we submitted there, and many brave legislators in their state Senate and House have taken this forward and are pressing for reforms and protections on the basis of the evidence we presented and criminal investigation. Unfortunately, their A.G. Drummond does not want to investigate at all, and now he's running for governor. That's very interesting. But this is evidence that's out there, and I think it's just, well, I'd like to hear your opinion on it. I think it's just hard for people to bear.
Yes, it is hard for people to bear. The people that I was working with 1,000 widows, and I don't know what they're doing now, but I'm always there for them to, talk about their stories and their cases. And there's too many similarities.
Yeah.
Too many similarities in these cases. And it's basically a standard of care that changed. And we know as clinicians that we follow evidence-based practice. We don't make things up, even in times of a pandemic. And so fast forward to now, I have somebody coming into the ER and they may have COVID.
If you are a nurse that is fed up with the sick care model, I have a solution for you. My name is Melissa Schreidfatter, and I am the owner and founder of the Functional Nurse Academy. FNA is the most comprehensive functional medicine training program on the market, specifically tailored to nurses. It is self-paced and equips LPNs, RNs, and nurse practitioners to practice functional medicine, address the root causes of dysfunction, and start their independent functional medicine practices. At FNA, you will learn how to order labs, functional health reports, create customized wellness plans, package and price your services, and even how to market your brand effectively. Graduates earn 90 nursing CEUs, and then they qualify for multiple board certification titles. They also will have access to our exclusive tools, such as our Functional Nurse Toolkit, our social media and marketing kit. And I don't want to just train you and send you on your way. So you also will get access to me each month via the Functional Nurse Academy monthly mentorship program, where you will be able to attend a live class with me each month. So Say goodbye to sick care and start your dream career as a functional medicine nurse. Enroll today at functionalnurseacademy.com.
They may have the flu. It doesn't matter. They have some virus that's overwhelming their body, and we will give them a steroid. We will send them home with some steroids. We will give them albuterol. We will give them a nebulizer treatment. We may even put them on an antibiotic. During COVID, we stopped doing all of that.
Everything.
Basically all of it. And that was the problem. And so what I see that now, since I've been back in the ER, I work there PRN. I pick up shifts when I want, so I'm there, I'm there a fair amount every month. And because, there's really no money in medical freedom, right? So
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Fortunately, I still can work at the bedside. And I see a lot more people that are awake to the system. They don't trust the system.
Right.
So it's interesting to me that, some jurors didn't understand what had happened, but I think we're still in the process of waking people up. And that means that we have to continue talking. When I talk at the nurses station, like everybody knows who I am there. I just don't promote where I work or anything.
Sure.
But when I talk there, I can't tell you how many nurses, probably 60% of them either have their own story of injury or their own coming to Jesus moment, if you will, or it affected their family member. So we know that something is not right in the system. And that's where ethics comes in for me. So I tell people all the time, the Bible is to the believer as the code of ethics is to the nurse. A lot of nurses, they don't realize what they can say and what they can't say. But there's a lot more than we can say and do than we can't. Let's just put it that way. And even in my ethics course that I have a whole section on the PrEP Act and CARES Act.
Oh, good.
On there to let nurses know, like, hey, listen, this is actually what happened, on top of, say, even the 1986 Act. We didn't know that in nursing school. Most nurses or doctors, they don't know that vaccine manufacturers are immunity and liability free. They don't know this stuff.
Right.
So it really is just continuing to have conversations and speaking out the way that we do. So it's good that you have that all on record. There was here in Arizona, we were supposed to have this COVID summit. And at the last, last week before we were going to all be there and present, it was told that we can't bring in hospital administrators. But to me, it's those hospital administrators that we need accountability from. Who told you what and when? Yes. And they didn't, and they said it was because of decorum. And I was like, if I ever hear that word, I'm going to explode again.
Yeah.
So,
well, and not to interrupt you, but I really appreciate that you said that, because one of the difficulties, I think, for the average person who is going through the trauma of the COVID era is, but my doctor wasn't mean to me. There were some nasty doctors and nurses, of course. There's always some. But many people have some affinity. They have some connection to their doctors, and there's also this general sentiment that we don't want to vilify the care providers. And I'm all for that. I agree. But the administrators are oftentimes, they're not even licensed practitioners in any way. And yet the way that they chose to take money and incentivize and disincentivize, it's both. They're perverse incentives is what they are. On the one hand, giving money for things that are lethal and harmful, and putting the stick in, that's the carrot. And then the stick is, and if you don't, you're out of a job in the middle of a pandemic. Or if you don't, your license is going to be in question. That is on the administrators and those in authority in those hospitals. And now that they're putting up these brand new $1 billion additions to their hospital, I'll tell you, that's on, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say that's blood money. That's the money from the deaths of all these people during COVID. And it's not okay. It's not okay at all. So when we identify the individuals that we're asking law enforcement to investigate, who we think are the ones responsible, of course, we mention the usual suspects at the federal level of the agencies, and Fauci included. I call it Fauci and friends, right? Walensky,
Yeah.
all those guys, and also some private individuals who were involved in the gain of function research, the creation of this
Yep.
Frankenvirus. But we also were very adamant. I was adamant at this. I said, it's the hospital administrators, because at any point in the COVID criminal enterprise, you could opt out and say, I will not be part of a criminal
Hmm.
enterprise. And at the point of the hospital administration who takes the money from the CARES Act, they could have said, not us. But in fact, we found evidence that that hospitals were being threatened, that basically everything they had would be pulled if they didn't take this CARES money for these PrEP countermeasures. So yes, the incentives go all the way up. But if somebody had been brave and said, no, I'm not going to take
Yeah.
money to murder people, it wouldn't have happened.
Right. And just for clarification for those that are listening, because maybe you're hearing this for the first time, we've been hearing about it for years. So we can say those words without it, being shocking. I mean, it
Right.
still kind of is shocking every time you hear it. But what we're talking about is the standard of care changed. And the reason being is because what people always said is, well, we don't know. We're doing the best we can. This is novel. This
Right.
is new. And, symptoms are not new. And that's what we treat. We treat symptoms,
Right.
not a test, okay? Not a diagnosis. We treat symptoms. And so just with my story of like when somebody comes into the ER now, we treat them. We actually treat them. But here's something else too that I think, kind of takes it a step further when we talk about what are you willing to do? What are
Mhm.
you willing to give up or forsake for the matter of truth?
That's right.
And then that's where, for me, it's always been, I know that this world's not my home. So
Right.
I'm not going to act like I live in it. I am going to submit my will to God, and I'm going to do my absolute
That's
best
right.
every day to follow that Holy Spirit, that voice and that leading. That's what I've done. And having said that, that means I drive an hour and a half to work one way.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have to figure out what is, where can I be that's going to honor my integrity
Mm.
and my calling.
Mhm.
And I have to drive. So be
Mhm.
it. If I needed to, leave out of my 1,000 square foot apartment because I've been here for 8 years, I would have gone and slept on somebody's couch with my kid. I
Yeah.
would not have continued to do that once I saw the writing on the wall. And that's where I think courage comes into play
Yes.
for people. And really, you stepping up and you speaking truthfully and authentically, Rachel, is really such a breath of fresh air because we have to honor who we are and what we're doing and not try to quote unquote play politics to try to attain some level of power, right? Because a lot of people,
Yeah.
what I've seen from blowing the whistle, I've been around a lot of different groups. I've been around a lot of different nurses. And let me tell you something, people get that power, they get that notoriety, they get that fame and forget about it. They forget
I
why
know.
they were called to do it in the first
I
place.
know. And I think you were just touching on it. It has grieved me greatly to see that even in the merry band of soldiers in the medical freedom fight, we saw that happen. We saw people
Mhm.
take, I guess, fame or whatever it might be, attention, and redivert it to themselves as opposed to the people they were supposed to serve or the glory of God. And I understand that that's a temptation. I get it. Some people may
Mhm.
not know this because I'm an attorney, but I actually started when I was a kid. I was in musical theater and performed at the local, not just in school, but at the local paid theater. We were child actors, so it was just fun for us. But they would sell
Mhm.
tickets, and it was and I was really into all of that, and I understand it. It's a lot of fun. But this is something really important, and if you're going to do something of value, of real value, you have to, what the Bible says is to die to yourself. That's it. That's the baseline. Die to yourself. Live a life of repentance. because you're going to get some things wrong or maybe lack wisdom here or there. But if those are your standards, a lifestyle of repentance, and especially if you are making a bid for leadership, that you do so from a standpoint of servant leadership, then I believe the Lord can guide you in that. And I think that whatever comes out of that is going to have eternal value and is going to be for the well-being of other people, which I think honors God. And to your point about courage, again, I applaud you because I think something people need to see is courage. How can I put this? Is a testimony, a witness of courage, not just somebody saying, I had courage back when I did XYZ, or we will have courage, but somebody who is actively going out there and fighting the fight and being pressed and crushed and still says, but my God is greater, and this is the course I need to take. I think courage is catching. And I think that, during the COVID era, what we saw is how few of us had courage and how powerful fear is. But love is so much stronger than fear. And yet somebody has to walk out in front and say, the love of God compels me and I have no fear. And you just have to walk in that. And I think it does inspire other people to find that, to seek God and to find that kind of courage and realize that we can overcome fear. And from fear, all the manipulation that happens and the tyranny that happens from that. And we can do that no matter how evil the world has gotten. And I know how evil it is. I mean, I'm an attorney. I see it all the time. It's soul vexing, but we can. There is hope. And I think what you're doing and what I'm attempting to do with my team is to demonstrate that day in and day out and hope that others are inspired by that and in their own sphere of influence, in their own families, in their own communities, that they find that courage and that love and build from there so that we can start to see our society. I honestly think the founding fathers had this vision. Maybe it wasn't articulated exactly the way I'm saying it, but I think that was the vision of self-governance, is that you don't have fear and you have this understanding of what God has given to you to produce, and just do it. Art, industry.
Yes. It's like those seeds that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do it. And so, frankly,
the seeds that are planted.
Is to relieve working families on the economic side. Another thing we're seeing is as everybody's pressed down and they were under COVID, then they're more manipulable and tyranny flourishes because people are just trying to survive. Leaders need to see freedom for people to take care of themselves and also the incentive to care for their neighbor who maybe cannot care for themselves. But that needs to be freedom within the community and amongst the people, not something that's top down or that is manipulated or frankly politicized into tyranny. I may be talking a little bit too broad brush here, but I feel like all of these things are related. And I think that the COVID era gave us an opportunity to see what we're really made of and that we need to repent and that we can do better than how we did in COVID.
Amen. I think it took, it certainly took the blinders off of me. This shirt, I haven't been able to wear it. I got it made during COVID and I was wearing it. It is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you. And that's what kept coming over and over. Like, Jodi, just do this, and I'm like, right. There's no other better place to be than in the will of God because it's really quite exciting. The valleys are low, but man, those mountaintops
a little too exciting,
Jodi.
A little
too high. Yes, they are. It really makes you say, okay, I want more of that. Okay, I want more. So here, closing out here, Rachel, is there any advice or tips you would give to nurses on documentation? Did you see anything in your lawsuits that could have helped if a nurse would have documented differently or anything like that?
That's a really valuable question. And I'm sure if I thought more about it, I could come up with some specific bullet points. But off the cuff, the one thing I would say definitively is make sure that you are documenting carefully and clearly
Mm.
in the official record, but also keep track of other things that maybe you're not required to track. There are so many caregivers now in the normal course in hospital protocols. You have so many doctors coming in and out. You have so many nurses, and the goal of the patient advocate, which should be somebody like a family member or whatever, is to track these things, to find out, between shifts of nurses or between visits of the various doctors, what's happening so that there can be some continuity. But not every patient has that patient advocate. And I think nurses
That's
have
why
an
the nurse is the
extraordinarily,
patient advocate.
and that's right. And I know it's a bit, it goes beyond maybe what is intended, but I think maybe that's the way to sum it up, is to say, operate as though this patient doesn't have another advocate and keep track of those things.
Mm.
Also, and I'm not sure maybe the direct bullet point for you here, so I'm sure that you could develop it from what I'm about to say, and that is, and probably Aaron Siri might have mentioned this when he was on. What we're seeing of the records is not always what was initially entered. So there have been manipulations and fraud occurring in medical records, and there's
Mm.
various points on that. But because claims are going to be based on the written evidence, that's very powerful evidence, and it's going to be very, very difficult for an aggrieved family member to prove that medical records have been tampered with if that's a material element of that particular claim of misconduct or wrongful death. So I think to the
Mm.
extent nurses can know that going in and pay attention to their own notes, understand what they've put in and keep track of if they see something that's off, document that. Because to the extent that a nurse can even give testimony that what they've presented or what were the records is not how the records look today in court, can be very powerful for many families that are going up against these big and well-funded defendants.
Yeah. So document. Nurses document. That's basically the thing. I always quote what a patient says. If I can, I just put it
That's
in
good too.
quotes. And what you're seeing at the bedside, stay in the rooms with the doctors when they're giving
Yeah,
information out so you can make sure that it's shared decision making and proper consent and to be proper informed consent has been taking
that's right.
place. And I'll put some more bullet points in my Substack too. That's nursesoutloud.substack.com. And okay, well, Rachel, thank you so much. Are there any closing thoughts or anything? I love where this went today. I wasn't expecting all that, but I'm here for it, being a witness and testimony.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jodi. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and I applaud you for what you're doing. I think it's incredible. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about the campaign. I certainly want to invite everyone to be a part of what we're trying to do. You can find the campaign at rachelforgov.com. My law firm is at viruslaw.group if you want to go there and see some of the work we've done. But we're certainly going to need prayer for the campaign. We're going to need support both
Mhm.
on the volunteer side of things. Florida is not a small state, and so there's a lot of ground to be covered. And I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk with the people about many of the things we talked about today. I mean, that's a huge part of why I'm running, but also about our need to address sound policy and change the perverse incentives on everything, on economic and fiscal concerns
Yeah.
that families have. As I mentioned on the judiciary, we need to hold courts accountable. And you mentioned at the very beginning, parental rights. This is one of the things that come from God, not the state. The state doesn't give parents the right over their kids. And that's in regards to all of those topics. I think Florida has been doing a good job in reclaiming those parental rights, but there's more to be done. And also reserving and preserving Florida's land. It's a beautiful place. God has given many, many resources to the state. And so I want to be able to talk about these
Mhm.
things across the state. So volunteers being involved is really important. And finally, we are going to need financial support for this. I'm not of the political class, obviously, and
Mhm.
I've I actually did sue the Florida Republican Party because they were coming after a Christian nonprofit organization who's my client. And so there's more reforms that need to be done there. And we're going to need the resources to get that message across during this campaign. So I really am grateful for this opportunity to talk with you. And I applaud all of your listeners on their courage to stand up for truth. And we look forward to seeing people working with us in the campaign.
Yes, that's great. That is Rachel, Rachel. Go check out her website. You heard what she had to say here, and we know that these 2026 midterm elections are going to be huge for our country. And so I really encourage nurses to get involved. We're at the beginning of life, at the end of life, and everything in between. So use your voice, use your influence, and help support candidates, that align with your beliefs. And that's very important. We have to, courage is acting. It's not just saying something. It's not liking a comment. It's not necessarily sharing. It's actually doing something. Okay. And so God bless you, Rachel. I'd love to have you back on again. Anytime,
Sure.
just reach out to me and we'll see how we can help elevate your voice.
Thank you so much. God bless you and all of your listeners.
Thank you for listening to Nurses Out Loud. Nurses are called by our code of ethics to keep learning, do the research, and lead with moral courage and integrity, especially as healthcare changes. Keep doing the next right thing, especially when it's hard. If this show resonated with you, please like, share, and follow. It boosts us up in the algorithm so more people can find us. Until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for the learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate.